Hey everybody, it's Eric from epautos.com, your libertarian car guy, and I'm going to do a quick walk around here of the 2018 Camry, which you may not even recognize as a Camry. They have radically restyled this car, as you'll see as I walk around it. I'll try not to jiggle the camera too much. I know I'm guilty of camera jiggling. It can't be helped. I'm not a super high-tech camera guy. At any rate, the reason for the sexing up has to do with the fact that the Camry, despite its status as one of the historically best-selling sedans that has ever been put on the market, isn't selling as well as it used to. Neither is the Honda Accord, which was also one of the best-selling sedans historically, or sedans generally. The problem is that the market has shifted away from sedans and toward crossovers, and the buyer base of the Camry in particular is kind of beginning to age out. There are older people, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and Toyota really wants to attract a younger demographic if they possibly can, and that's why they have sexed this thing up so much, to the extent that it almost looks like a Lexus. In fact, if you took the Toyota badges off this thing and put Lexus badges on it, let me show you the interior. This one is fairly loaded. It's got the contrast red leather interior. Last year, 2 years ago, this would have been very believable as the new GS350 or just a new Lexus, period. Anyway, so the question arises, why is it that sedans are not as popular as they used to be, and why are crossovers so popular? My personal theory on that is that sedans have generally gotten smaller overall. If you look at the market under $30,000 in particular, there aren't many really big sedans. I love the Camry. The Camry's a roomy car, but in comparison to the sedans that Americans drove as recently as the 90s, 80s, and certainly in the 70s, when there were still a lot of really big sedans available, things like the Ford Crown Vic, the Chevy Impala, the old model, the rear-wheel drive version, and vehicles of that type that really were potentially six-passenger vehicles and had huge trunks, and so they were viable as family cars. These cars are less viable as family cars, in part because they seat five, and in part because they have small trunks too, relative to the old sedans. Something that is of interest and relevant to this is the fact that because of all the child safety seat requirements, for a lot of people, a sedan is effectively not even a five-seater or a four-seater, because if they have a young kid, they've got to put the kid in the back seat with the child safety seat because of the airbag up in front. So that essentially eliminates the front passenger seat as a passenger seat, and that makes a sedan even more impractical for families, and hence the need for the crossover, the three-row crossover in particular. So that's the long and short of it, in my opinion. I think that's the main reason why crossovers have taken over, and as crossovers have become popular and more of them are on the road, if you're in a sedan, you're kind of feeling down in the canyon because you're surrounded by these tall riding crossovers, and people like that. People like riding up high. They also like the fact that almost all of the crossovers on the market are available with an all-wheel drive system, which I think has been way oversold, but nonetheless people like it and want it. And very few sedans, unfortunately, offer it. Maybe they should have put all-wheel drive in some of these vehicles to make them more popular, but I think that really the fundamental problem is that people just want a more versatile car, which is unfortunate. This is a good-looking and fun-to-drive car. And relative to the cars it competes with, it actually has something that they don't, and they have something that it doesn't. And what is that thing? Well, the Camry still has a V6. God bless Toyota for not giving up on the V6 and going with the tiny turbo 4 as its rival, the Honda Accord, has done. Not that there's anything wrong with the turbo 4s, but when all else being equal, I think that over the long haul, if you're like me, if you're the kind of person who buys a car and keeps a car for a long time, 10, 15 years or more, I think that it's a safer bet to go with the V6 versus a turbo 4. It's a less complicated engine. It's a less stressed out engine. fewer things to potentially go wrong. You know, Turbo 4s may prove to be very reliable over time, but the truth is we do not know because they've only been in circulation, mass market, for a relatively short period of time. So anyway, you can still get a V6 in this thing without the turbo, and the standard engine does not have a turbo either. So if you're a little bit leery of the turbo, as I am, you may be interested in this car. Some other things to know that are worth knowing. While Toyota has gone to direct injection for both of its engines, they have added a port fuel injection circuit to that in order to forestall the potential problem of carbon buildup resulting from the direct injection. If you're listening to this, if you read any of my rants about that subject, and if you've kept up with this subject generally, you will know that there have been some issues with direct injection because it's essentially a dry flow system. The fuel injector is actually inside the cylinder and it's not above the valves. Gas is a solvent, and in a regular port fuel or carbureted system, the fuel washes over the back of the valve, and it actually helps to keep the back of the valves from building up carbon crud. The DI systems have had a problem with carbon crud building up on the intake valves, and that can potentially be a hassle down the road. So anyway, you shouldn't have to worry about that with this Toyota. Let's have a look at the interior. And again, this is a loaded out V6 that they sent me that has this really sharp contrast color leather. You'll see they made it much more of a kind of a driver's oriented cockpit. You'll see how the center console kind of cants over to the left toward the driver. The shifter is on the left side of the console. It's got a very Lexus-like sport bike style gauge cluster. So it's very much unlike the previous Camry. And like the previous Camry, it still has a very nice, very generous, very roomy back seat. Note in particular the way that the floor is. The floorboards are both very flat and very wide relative to what you'll find in some of the other cars in this class, in addition to having lots of legroom. It's one of my favorite cars, actually. I've always liked the Camry, including previous Camrys, just because they're really solid, really good cars. And now it's sportier, so hopefully they'll be able to attract in some younger buyers. And we won't see the end of the sedan, and we won't see crossovers become the homogeneous vehicle of choice, or no choice, I should say, that everybody drives. So anyway, more up at epautos.com. Thanks for viewing, and we'll catch up with you again soon.